Okay, so I'm just going to do a little bit more on lighting before I start tying together all the different views that I've been creating and looking at how they can be finalised on the sheets that you're going to be making. And so, so I've got open here the ground floor ceiling plan. And so make sure, if you haven't already, that you can work comfortably in your ceiling plans. Even though the upper level ceiling plan might be a bit difficult, and you can see mine there looks a little bit confusing because I've got all of these rafters in there. Most of that's because I've got a ceiling that I've made that is there to host the lights. The ground floor ceiling plan's much simpler, but again I can see the joists there from the underside, and also the ceiling over here on the left that I've added in under those joists. And probably the most important thing when you're working in any ceiling plan is that you can see your ceiling. So I'll just remind you, on the upper level I can see the ceiling there because I've adjusted the view range already, and the view range originally would have been set to this setting, level above, and so those rafters wouldn't have been showing. And so here I've just make sure you realise I've got nothing selected, and that means in properties it's going to give me the view properties, or the properties for the view that's open. And so then down towards the bottom of that properties panel you'll see that setting for view range. If you click edit there, often a good option if you just want to work on it to create your lights is to set the top and the view depth to unlimited, which just means you'll be able to see everything above without having to worry too much about what those settings actually mean or do.
So I can't do light photos on the ceiling?
You can't place lights into the ceiling if you can't see it.
Can I put lights on my wall?
You can,
Yeah.
but not very many spaces are lit entirely with wall lights. So it's important to be able to place ceiling lights. You can still place wall lights as well,
Yeah. So
and floor lights.
now, because I don't have a ceiling.
Yeah, so you'll need to create a ceiling if you want to have ceiling lights. So, and that's a different thing. Here I've made the ceiling with rafters, which is a bit of a cheap method, but it works. And that's so that we can have lights hanging off the rafters. And I've done the same thing on the lower level. I've made my joists, well, I've set my joists to the ceiling category, so Revit thinks they're a ceiling. And I've given those things to you, so if you copy and paste them from the file I've given, then that'll work. But if you want to make your own ceilings, on the architecture tab you've got the ceiling tool, and it shouldn't be any more difficult than making a floor really. And so when you click on the ceiling tool, if you want to draw your own shape, you use sketch ceiling, and then draw the shape you want with the options in the draw panel, and make sure you're aware of the height that you want that ceiling to be above the floor. And so that's in one of the earlier videos I went through this. And it shouldn't be any more difficult than making a floor. You just draw the shape you want in plan, but the main thing there that will sometimes throw you off is the height. And you can always check that in a section or an elevation view and see exactly how high it needs to be based on the levels that you have. Then, when you have created your ceiling, so I've created this ceiling earlier just with a rectangle, and then, as I was saying, the joists also happen to be ceilings, not in real life, just for Revit. And then using the component tool, you can go to Load Family, and then in the Lighting Fixtures folder, or just Lighting, Architectural Internal, you'll find all the basic lights. And this one here, downlight spot, is often a good option if you want a light suspended off something like a floor joist. And a little tip I can give you there, when you load something, when you load a family, and then it doesn't come up in the properties panel, it's actually a bit of a reminder that the guys who developed Revit, I think, have left in there deliberately. It doesn't mean that the family hasn't loaded. It means that you've loaded it previously, and so they want you to choose it from the list here. It's one of those annoying things. I think they could have easily made it different, but they haven't. So you just need to remember, if you use load family and load something in the correct way, and it won't, if it doesn't give you an error, then it means you've loaded it correctly. Then you just need to go and have a look in the list here and find the family that you've loaded from there. And so there it is. So this is the one I just went to use, or chose using load family, downlight spot, and scrolling in the properties panel there I can find it. And so notice this family has different tilt options. I'm just going to use the 90-degree tilt, which is pointing straight down. The others are angled towards the wall. So with the 90-degree tilt, don't worry about the voltage difference. That doesn't affect the brightness. So then I'm just going to choose the joist. So notice I can't place the lights in between those joists because that's the floor. Those straight lines are my floorboards on the level above. But because I've set the joist to be a ceiling, I can place this light onto any of those joists.
But if you had a flat ceiling, you'd be able to put the downlights anywhere.
Exactly, yeah. So I can just place lights roughly where I want them. And I'll put a few over this side as well. Oh, that one I'll delete that one later. Okay, so I might just get rid of that one. And so notice they've got an icon which shows you the direction of the light. So you can select any of those lights and then use space. And the grill there at the front shows the direction that it's pointing. And if you do want to use any of those angled options, so you've got here 75-degree tilt, and I'll show you a section so you can see that light. So there's the one that I just set to an angle. So I can choose any of these, and with space, rotate them in the section view, and then again set them to an angle. Yeah. So really good for pictures on walls and things like that. So I'll set this one to 75-degree tilt. Sometimes it's easier to just do that in plan. So now, again, with space, I can rotate it twice and I know it's pointing towards that wall. Exactly, yeah. So you can select a group of them using Control and rotate them as a group.
How do you rotate space?
Space, yeah. So space is like a quick rotate.
Is that space with everything?
Yep.
Oh.
Yep. So not everything rotates in the same way. And notice it's just going in 90-degree increments. If you want to do it at a different angle,
And does it rotate
you've got to use rotate. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I've got enough lights there to do a render. And if I go to the perspective view I have showing that area, then the render tool, I've rendered this previously using these settings, so I'll just go show rendering, and there we are. So that's, if I go to adjust the exposure, that's had the exposure fine-tuned, so you need to be aware when you're rendering, initially it'll have default settings for the exposure, and you virtually always need to adjust that. And it's very sensitive. If you want to know what these values mean, look up photographic exposure. It's exactly the same as what you have when you use a camera. And so down the bottom, so you've got this option here, adjust exposure.
And that's in the render dialog.
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
So you've already done that render, now
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
So you have to do the render before you can actually start playing with it.
Yeah, exactly. You can do it beforehand, but you won't see it as you adjust it until you render. So the range is between 2 and 15, usually 2 for a low light situation in an interior, up to about 15 for an outdoor render with the sun, which is probably the brightest render you'll do. And so that's the main control, the top one there, which is the exposure value. But then you've got others. So the white point's an interesting one. Make it warmer, and that'll increase the yellow and red hues. Make it cooler, and that'll increase the blue and cyan. So if you've done the photography, it's exactly the same concept. Yeah, usually I used to always go for cool, but lately I've been doing a lot more warmer ones, depending on the sort of light you use. I think, but yeah, cool is probably a little bit more realistic most of the time, but only because warm lights are being used less these days as well. So the more energy efficient lights tend to be cooler. Yeah, they're more common. Yeah, just from the default Revit. Yep, library. Yep.
I'm just finding that the one that I'm trying to show up is, and the cement and the steel is like dotted.
Oh, the cement, there's a really good one in there, concrete. But yeah, there are some awful concretes as well. Yeah, I'll show you those later. But yep.
My favourite concrete texture is actually something I'm looking as well.
Yeah, you can get good ones online, but there is a really good one in Revit.
And then I scanned it.
Yeah, that's often what people do actually.
I use it as concrete all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, like in the class we had to make sponges and make concrete texture.
Yep.
I scanned that and I use it on Photoshop.
Yep.
For my scenes.
So to save it in Revit, you can just use Save to Project, and that'll save the rendered image into the project browser, which is a useful thing. So always use that option, but then I'm also going to use export because I want to show you a little bit about Photoshop if we have time. So that's for later when I get to do some Photoshop. And then in Sheet, make a new sheet. I think I've done some of this already, but I don't think I've put any rendered ones on. No. Okay, so I'm going to make a new sheet. And then in the renderings section you can see I've got ground living because I used Save to Project, so I can just drag that across from there. To change the size of a rendering that you've saved in Revit, it's a bit tricky actually. You need to activate the view, so when it's selected, activate view, click on the image, and then you can either stretch it using the border or type in a size in properties. I'm going to deactivate the view just by right clicking and deactivate view. No, unfortunately. Yep. Yeah, well, the thing with renderings is that the default tag, I'll just make that a little bit smaller actually, the default tag that you get with Revit always gives you the scale. And you can make your own tags. It's one of those kind of more advanced things though. So I'm not going to show you how to do that. You need to know how to do annotation families, and we haven't even done annotation yet.
You don't need to do it on that particular one.
Exactly, that's right, that's right. Or even just in Revit, select the viewport, and then in properties, choose no title.
Yes.
And then I'm going to show you how to do text in a moment as well. So you can easily add in your own title here if you want to, or like saying do it in another program later. So, back to the other views. So we've got the views that I showed you last time, just doing plan and section views, which is really important. But you've probably been noticing that they can look a little bit incomplete. That sheet actually I think I'll delete altogether. But they can look fairly incomplete even with all of the settings that you can apply to the graphics in Revit. And you might wonder, well, how do people get more complete or correct looking drawings out of Revit? And the answer is that they add a lot of things using the tools on the Annotate tab. They've got detail lines and all of the dimensioning and annotation tools, text and tagging and all those things. And you can do virtually anything that you can do in AutoCAD in the same way in Revit. So in AutoCAD, I'm sure you know, you draw most of it in 2D, and you can draw any line work you like in AutoCAD because it's all just 2D line drawing. Same in Revit.
Not what the construction teacher told us today.
What? That you can't draw anything in Revit? Yeah, some people just don't know Revit as well as they know AutoCAD. Yeah, well that's difficult. I don't know too many people who design buildings who haven't bitten the bullet and learnt the CAD program. Because yeah, there are a few people I've come across who still do everything by hand, and they're so slow compared to everyone else that they don't really get much. Oh, is it Brian? Or no? Laurie. Oh, right, Laurie. Yeah, well, yeah, I know. Laurie has. I know the people. I've set up his office. It's funny. He doesn't have any drawing boards in there. It's all computers. So,
Much like smart design, really.
We've got
Oh yeah, a drawing.
yeah, exactly. That's right. Yeah. Yeah. So. Yeah. It's funny. It's always the people who don't know the different tools. I still like hand drawing, but not as a final presentation method. It's just too slow. So anyhow, hand drawing does have its place, I suppose. And so with Revit though, you'd be surprised how many people, even ones who use it all the time, don't realise that it has all of this 2D, these 2D drawing tools that really give you the ability to draw anything that you can do in Revit, or really anything you can do by hand. Because if you're doing line drawing, you're essentially drawing in 2D, and you can set any line style you like. And I don't care what anyone says, a computer is always going to do a better job drawing a straight line than a person is. And if that's right. And everyone who
Accurate.
exactly.
Exactly.
Yeah. I know. Look, and I've done hand drawing. I did hand drawing for a living for about 5 years before CAD was dominant. Yeah, from the late 80s to the early 90s, I was. That's what I did for a living. And then CAD took over, thankfully, and I was the person who trained the office up. I sort of, but it was gradual through the 90s, and then yeah, suddenly towards the end of the 90s, everyone was doing it, and yeah.
When did Revit start?
Revit was 2000 roughly. It's, I think, very late 90s. Revit Corp started in Boston, and then Autodesk got it in about 2000, and that's when it really took off. So, so in this isometric view, you can see, obviously, I've got the building there, and I thought it would be a good example I can show you using detail lines in a fairly simple way to make an exploded isometric. So I'm going to duplicate that view and rename it, and I'll call this ISO exploded 1, and then you'll see when I put them all together. Yeah. So I'm going to turn on the section box there, and then crop that right back so I can see inside the building. But yeah, just on the hand drawing thing while I'm doing this, it's amazing how I think people have got rose-tinted glasses when they think back on about the way things used to be done. Because I was pulling out some drawings that an architect I used to do a little bit of work with, who's fairly famous, did of the things he designed, and his buildings are on the cover of a lot of the architecture books about architecture in Sydney. He's a great architect. I reckon he would be failing if he submitted those drawings now, They were just very basic line drawings, plans, sections, elevations, and that was it. He never did a perspective, never. And he was trained at the Bauhaus in Germany, the real one. Hugh Burek was his name. Hugh Burek. Yeah, great architect. Yeah, oh yeah, his house in the one in Castle Crag. Yeah, it's beautiful. Yep. Yeah, I spent a lot of time there. Yep, that's it. That's all they did traditionally. Yeah. So it's the building that was the product, not the graphics on the page. And then with Photoshop and Illustrator, people have been enhancing the hand-drawn stuff so much, they seem to think that's what people used to do, and I can't find too many examples. Yeah, and actually I'm going to flip this around to the other side because my kitchen is in an awkward place, and I'm going to change that section box a bit more. So notice I'm just toggling it on and off using the light bulb because I've hidden it previously. The section box. Well, that was what the training always was. I mean, Frank Lloyd Wright was famous for not doing any work until an hour or two sometimes before his clients arrived. But he had the design in his head. And there's a famous story about him scaring all his students who used to live with him by not doing any work until a really big client arrived with a massive project. And then a few hours before that, he just quickly drew up the plans and sections and got the job.
That's really bad time management.
I know, he just knew he could do it. I mean, he'd been working for a long time and he just knew how long it took. When you're doing it for a living every day, it's amazing how quick you become.
Students to do that.
No. So I've got my my lower level set up there with an isometric, and now I'm going to duplicate that view, and then I'll call the new one simply Exploded 2, and then I'm going to change the section box there so that it shows the upper level. And then I'm going to hide a few things like the roof there just by using normal hide. And actually I wanted to have the rafters showing, but I think it's a bit awkward, so I'm going to hide them too. Yeah. Okay, so I'm showing the upper level there. Now on a sheet, so I'm going to make a new sheet. So I'm going to drag those two views. There's the lower level, ISO Exploded 1. I'll set that to no title because I don't want to see the title for these views. And then Exploded 2, I'll put above that. Notice Revit gives you a nice little line there that'll line them up.
Oh, this is fancy stuff.
Okay, so we can have then those two set out one above the other. Sometimes you get the lines seeming to come through, but when you zoom in you'll see that they're actually okay. And then to get the dashed lines that you'll often want to have to connect these things and give people an idea how they join together, you can use detail lines. So on the Annotate tab with detail line, you have all these different line styles. And so I'll just use dashed 0.25 pen, I think. And I'm just going to draw a line. Yeah, it is exactly the same way you do it if you're drawing by hand. So it's connecting these. Oh yeah, just eyeballing it. Yep, exactly. Yep. So you might have one here that doesn't necessarily even connect to anything. Something like that. So that's all there is to it. And the great thing about the way Revit works is you can now go and keep working on the design, and this exploded view is going to keep getting updated. Whereas if you're doing this by hand, you've got to go and redraw every single drawing, and it's tedious. Yep. Oh, so no, there, I just missed one of the detail lines, unfortunately, so I'll undo that. Oops. So, there we go. So I'm going to select properly, and there we go. That's better. Okay, so detail lines, you can obviously draw on a sheet, and that's actually a bit of a secret in Revit, because a lot of people use model lines and then get a nasty shock when they go to draw on a sheet and realise you can't draw model lines on a sheet, but you can always draw detail lines. And yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so, say then I had a bathroom. I haven't even put a bathroom into this drawing yet, but I should probably have one. So it would most likely go here. And so I'll just do a really quick little outline of it. Alright, so it's amazing how quickly you can knock up a bathroom in Revit, because you don't really need to see everything in 3D. And so you have in the plumbing fixtures all these 2D components. If you don't need to see it in 3D, it doesn't need to be 3D. So if you want to see a 3D toilet, there is a 3D version of this. But again, if you're not going to see it, there's not much point making it in 3D. And
what will that look like? Just
nothing.
Just
Yep, you won't even see that. So, yep, it'll just be nothing. But there's a 2D section toilet that you can add in to the section, and it's a much smaller file and also easier to manage. Exactly, you can, absolutely. And that's how people do their details, because AutoCAD's still a faster program to draw in 2D. And so you can do all of that 2D line work in AutoCAD, and then just, like saying, import it into Revit. So here, showers usually are just 2D in Revit. And that's almost enough detail for a bathroom with a basin. But then, yeah, oh, it's very small, I know. But, well, 90% of en-suites these days in Sydney are about that size. And so then with the wall, if you... Yeah, I'd stick a basin in, obviously, but yeah, but you can get those small basins. But then what I was going to show you is you might want, say, some alcoves on the wall. And because you're not going to see this bathroom in 3D, rather than model those into the wall, again, you can just draw with the detail line tool and just draw lines over the top. So you've got all the different basic line weights there. So we'd say a 0.18, just draw rectangles, and that's often going to be enough for things like that. Exactly, that's right, and it'd be a fairly complicated little exercise. And people do that. I've seen people do these amazingly detailed 3D models just to pick up a skirting or a cornice in a section view. When really, if you're not going to see it in any other view, there's no point doing all of that modelling. You may as well just draw it in 2D. And that's always been the approach with AutoCAD and with traditional hand drawing as well. Just draw what you need to design it, not to recreate it in 3D. So, and so the dimensioning and the text tools work the same. If I go into the plan, so this is the one I've set up for the sheet, and so I might have in here, well, we did this with the doors actually. I know I showed you detail lines a little bit using the doors there, because the family didn't have those things showing properly. So I might just show that again if I hide this. Okay, so we just didn't have time to do that in the family, but I'll go a bit further with the tools on Annotate as well as detail lines. You have regions, So just using a filled region, I'm going to draw a rectangle, and notice you have a line style option there as well. So I'm going to use medium lines here and just draw a 100 by 50, also 100 by 40 door jamb. Oh, sorry, it's not that way, so that's 40. And then the other way, 100. Quite small. And then I've already made a new filled region, but I'll make another one. So I'm going to go edit type, duplicate, and we'll call it timber hatch. And then I can edit the fill pattern and set it to any of these preset patterns. Or you can use the model patterns as well. But I'm going to choose new and then go to custom and then import. And if you browse, probably the easiest way to the P drive, Interior Design and Revit Library, which is where this shortcut over here will take me anyway. In the Chew Revit Library, there's, if you go again to Chew Library, a hatch patterns folder, I'm sure. Here we are at the end, X hatch patterns. And it's got a lot of good predefined patterns. If you look it up, you can make your own, but it's fairly complicated to make them. But you can use any of these. And a good option actually is the original Revit pattern file. So these all have just one pattern, but I'm going to choose again this Revit one, which has a whole list of them. So you can see if I scroll down through the list here, all these different patterns. So we've got wood patterns, if you want to have a wood grain showing. So there we are. Yep. And then you can set a scale for that. So you have to, honestly, you have to use a bit of trial and error sometimes to get the scale right. But I'll just leave it with that one and see how it looks with a scale of 1. So I'll finish that. And, well, that's at 1 to 50, but then if I go to 1 to 20, then, yeah, no, actually that's not great. 1 to 100, sorry, is probably what we need to see, and then we're going to miss it. Let's try 1 to 5. Yep, there we are. So, so it depends on the scale, but at 1 to 50, probably don't need to see a lot of detail. Otherwise, though, you can go and adjust the scale. But it's nice when you go to a lower scale. Probably have to go to something like 1 to 10, and then you'll start to see it. And then I can copy that whole object. On the side, and then just draw the rest of the door so that line, well actually I might just show you, if you need to adjust it, it'd be nice to see something in this one. Okay, so I've got the fill pattern there, just go browse and use the same method, new, custom, import, choose the Revit pat file, and scroll down to the one you want, and then you can change the scale. And that's the only way to give a different scale. So if I make it 0.2, I'm just going to change the name there as well. So I made it a bit too dense there actually. Yep, so I've got to go back now. It's a shame you can't just go and change the scale after you've made them, so you have to keep making it again every time you want to change the scale. Yeah, no, it's a difficult one. Normally you wouldn't show that sort of wood grain pattern on a 1 to 50 drawing anyway. But yeah, 1 to 20 it's showing, so that's not too bad. And then just with detail lines, we can draw extra line work. Yeah, sure. Yeah, absolutely. So I'm just going to do the door swing here with the arc tool. Right, so hopefully you've got a pretty good idea how to draw things in 2D anyway, but I just want to give you an idea about those tools. And then dimensioning. Have you done much with the dimension tools in Revit? No, so I'll just quickly show you those. Again, once you've got the basic idea, you'll be able to work most of it out. So again, on the Annotate tab, you've got these different options for dimensioning. And 90% plus of your dimensions you can do with the Align tool. So which one do you use in AutoCAD? Do you remember the dimension tool that you use there? Oh, if you don't remember, so linear in AutoCAD is the one you'd use there, but in Revit it's different. So you don't use linear very often, and you tend to use aligned for most things, even when they're linear dimensions. So in other words, horizontal and vertical is a linear. So you, again, for all those different types of dimensions, still use aligned. It's much easier. And so often the main option that you need to set there is to set wall faces as the things you want to pick. Leave it on individual references to begin with, just to get used to picking different elements. And so here I can just go along picking the insides of these, or the different sides of the walls. So there, because I've got a curved wall, I'd need to really think about how I dimension that, but I can at least pick the different sides and just make sure I don't go too far away from that. So that's going to give me all these internal measurements in one row. And yeah, so if you just spend a bit of time with that Align tool, you can do most of the things you need. But then just to show you a couple of tricks with Aligned again, if I set that to entire walls instead of individual references, then you get the Options button. So without choosing anything, if I pick this wall, it's going to dimension from one side to the other, which is a nice way of getting quick overall dimensions. But go back to Options and turn on Openings and set it to widths. It's okay, then I can pick that wall again, and this time it'll do all the windows for me. Yep. Yep. And then back to Options one more time, and this time I'll turn on Intersecting Walls and turn off Openings, and then pick this wall, and then again it's done all those internals. Yep. So it's super quick once you get used to it, all just with the Align dimension tool. But at first, individual references. A long time, yeah. But sometimes it's nice to have the control that you get in AutoCAD. So I'm just going to nudge these over, and if you want to have a look at dimensioning standards, have a look in the Australian Standard for Technical Drawing. AS 1100 Part 301 is the architectural standard, and it tells you how all of these dimensions should look. But the final thing I need for this drawing is text. So I've done some detail lines to add in the extra line work I wanted, done some regions to add in some extra hatching, and then, well, I'll hide that rug, I don't want that. And then drawn some dimensions. And so finally now I can put some text on. So you have the text tool, which I'll show you is different to what you have on the architecture tab, which is model text. So just like model lines, model text is 3D text. So it's for 3D views, shows up in all of your views. It's not your main text tool, just like model lines are not your main line tool. So on the Annotate tab, you have detail lines, which are really your main line tool, and then the Annotate tool, or the text tool, is your main text tool, not model text. So with text there, you've got these preset types, which unfortunately are all set to be Arial. But you can easily go edit type, duplicate, and what's a good one? Tahoma. Isn't bad. So upside they give that height. So Tahoma 3.5. And then I can set the font there to any font, and so obviously I'm going for Tahoma. Where is it? Oh, there we go. Okay, so that easy. You can make any text that you can do in any other Windows program pretty much. And so I'll just make a rectangle for my text and type in what I want. Oh, what happened there? Sorry, I cancelled it before finishing. Yep. Oh, sorry. No, that's right. It's only in the floor plan. That's right. Exactly, and that's the whole point of the Annotate tab. It's drawing over the top of the view, not in the 3D model. And that's how you don't want this text to show in the other views. Exactly. Yeah. So it looks small there, but that's because of my scale. This is where Revit's brilliant. This is actually why Revit was created, more than anything, to do things like the scaling of text and dimensions automatically, which in AutoCAD you have to do manually. So there you can see the text and dimensions have all changed size simply because I've changed my scale. Okay, to change the text type, to remind you, I can easily put in a new size here and just change it. So using the types to manage your text size. And you can put in things like backgrounds as well. So in here you've got background options, so I'll make that opaque. Makes it a bit easier to read. And you can, of course, copy text and edit it. Sometimes that's easier than redoing it. So of course you can do nicer fonts in programs like InDesign. But the fact that it scales it for you, and for plan drawings, it doesn't really need to be a graphically beautiful font, always, as long as it's good enough. So all of that will go onto the sheet. And so I have that already on a sheet, and that's now ready to go. Let's bring that down. So I think I did show a little bit before about title blocks, and then just to maybe show you again, you can always activate a view on a sheet or a title block to change things and make them fit in with the sheet or the page size. Then one of the other things that you've got to do, it says in the brief, is it says a north point, because I wrote this, here we go, north point. We've done annotation, and then north points are a funny one. You do them with symbols usually. So again, another one on the Annotate tab. Symbol, load family, and in annotations, symbols, general, you should have some north points. There we are. Pretty ugly, all of them, to be honest, but you can easily edit these and make them nicer. I'm not going to show you my new one because I've come up with one I think's the simplest I've ever seen, and but I'll show you the next best one. So I'll go edit family. I don't want anyone else to use it. And but yeah, it's amazing when you try and rationalise things how simple you can make them. But the one that's often been thought of as one of the simplest is this. So I'm going to offset maybe 2 and see if it'll let me. Oh, 1. Let's see if we can do 1. So lots of firms use this sort of north point, which is not bad. And so I'll save that as a new file. Into the main Revit library, so you can always get to that. I'm going to put it in the architectural folder, where there should be some other north points anyway. So I'll call it north arrow 5. So I'll load that back in. You can place them into the views, into a plan view, but I just find it easier to do it on the sheet. So back to here, let's select that now and change it to a new one. So it's that easy, and you can rotate them using the rotate tool if you need north to be different direction.
So that's not going to affect like the rendering.
No. No, it's just a graphical. Yeah. Yeah, no, look, you could write a little script to make it follow the true north direction, but it's probably easier just to manually turn it. So the viewing labeling, or the view labeling, I just mentioned before, you can do with text. So here, rather than using the automatic viewport titles, just remember you can always just draw in your own text with the text tool on a sheet. And the size is managed in the same way as everything else. So when you choose 3.5 or 5 mil from the list here, that's the size it'll be on the sheet. And so the very final thing, I'll do the Photoshop later. So if you want to put an image you've saved, you can always go to the Insert tab and choose Image. And so I saved that rendering earlier, and I'll show you later how you can do a few basic things in Photoshop to adjust it. But then to bring that image back in, I can simply insert it using the Image tool, and it's in here. There we are. Place it on the sheet, and often it's easier just to work with them like that rather than bring them in from the rendering section in your project browser. So that's it. That should give you enough to do all the views you need as a minimum for this project. But like I was saying, I will show you later how to do a few extra things using Photoshop to adjust those views that you've rendered.
Are we happy with individual sheets? You don't want us to put them into one?
Oh, look, if you know how to do that, you can just, well, it's fairly simple. When you make you'll need to make a PDF of each sheet. So you can go to Adobe PDF in here and just make a... Oh, you need to give the Revit file as well?
Oh, yeah.
And then a PDF of each sheet.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Yeah. And so, again, just using this to print to a PDF, you can easily make a PDF file for each page. And then make sure you've got it on zoom 100%, choose your page size. and always check the preview. And so that'll make a separate page for each one. And it's a fairly simple thing then to combine all those PDFs into one file if you want to. It's not required for this assignment, but it's something that you should try because it'll help you with other things. So I just call this, sheet 5 for now. I'll let you try and work out how to combine the pages if you haven't tried that yet. It's fairly simple. I might do that next week if you're not sure. But like I said, that should give you more than enough to be able to do all those things you need for the assignment. But just remember in here that misprint, it says 6 isometrics, but on the next page it says 4 isometrics, and so that's what you need, just 4, not 6. Floor plan of each level, cross section. You don't even need to do an elevation. You can if you want to, but the render perspectives are probably the most important thing. Yeah, so that should do it.